talk to you today without being able
Thank
to
you.
see my slides or my speaker notes, so we're going to see how this all goes. Now, a couple of things I'd like to point out. I am the thing standing between you and drinks, okay? So the more audience participation I have here, the faster we can get to those drinks. All right, I'm glad to hear this. Okay. Also, if I'm going too long, somebody yell at me because I can't really see much out here. Oh, there's Tom. All right, I saw his hand. So I'm here to talk to you today about how we can not forget our humans when we look at our technical systems and ourselves. And we started out today with Laura talking about burnout. And we've heard burnout throughout the conference. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, this is a good thing that we are talking about burnout, that we're talking about mental illness, and that we're having these conversations openly within the industry. At the same time, there are so many talks about burnout that it's really concerning that this is something that is so prevalent within our industry. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can recognize the signs and then what we can do about it by applying the things that we already do every day. So who has seen these before? All right, a few hands. Okay, these are the death balls, self-discovered service dependencies, circa 2015. This shows you how complex systems were, almost a decade ago, 8 years ago. Math is hard. But this shows you how complex systems were. And they didn't become less complex over time. They became more complex and more interconnected. And the more interconnected our systems became and the more complex meant that there was more opportunity for failure within our systems. And we really started talking about reliability. Sal just talked to us all about SLOs, right? We talk about reliability. We talk about chaos engineering. We talk about all these practices to help our systems withstand failure and prevent failure, and for failure not to affect our customers, whether it's your internal customers or your external paying customers, whoever those customers are. And that's a shout out to Tim Banks from a conversation yesterday on what truly makes a customer, which I think we should have an open space about tomorrow. When we talk about our human systems are also extremely complex. We have multiple systems that rely on themselves within our bodies, right? We have our circulatory system, our respiratory system, all of these systems. And oftentimes if something goes wrong with one thing, other systems are dependent on it, and something goes wrong with the other. So we talk about this again with our technical systems on how do we look at these dependencies. And so let's talk a little bit about who I am. I'm Julie Gunderson. I'm a senior developer advocate with AWS. And yes, I'm an organizer for Devopsdays Boise, which I've been actively recruiting speakers here for because they've been amazing. And so just trying to grab some of those people down to Boise, Idaho. So all the way on the other side. And yes, we grow potatoes and have a blue football field. We also have technical people there, and it's just generally a great place. Now today I was supposed to give this talk with Ana Margarita Medina from Lightstep, but she couldn't be here today due to a personal emergency. But that's actually kind of great because I'm going to be talking about how we apply our systems thinking. And the fact that Anna isn't here didn't mean that neither one of us could be here, that the talk couldn't happen because we had some redundancy built in. So going back to reliability, now this is how AWS defines reliability in the well-architected framework: the ability of a workload to perform its intended function correctly and consistently when it's expected to. So when we think about that, and when we think about the people designing and operating these systems, reliability can be stressful. That system should be operating the way it's supposed to, like all the time. That can add a lot of pressure onto people, and that pressure has only increased. The last, 3 years, 2 years, however long that pandemic was, that didn't give time for people to sit at home and relax. No, we were all working to change our systems and to make sure they worked for the people that depended on them, so that people could get groceries, so that people could get medication, so that Netflix was running and we could watch The Witcher to keep us sane. But reliability and this increased push for reliability also adds on quite a bit of stress to the humans who operate these systems. And there's a lot of impact, as I just mentioned. I mean, there's safety, there's technical impact, environmental impact, and not to mention reputation. I remember when I was at a conference in 2014 and I heard Ben Rockwood from Chef talk about Facebook when they had a cascading failure and it led to an outage. And I had to go to a conference to hear this talk about this failure. Now, if there's a failure or even a little blip, that hits the mainstream media. That affects stock prices, that affects shareholders. There's so much pressure now to essentially be perfect with our systems. And we do talk about 5 nines of uptime, but we've got to be realistic for both our systems and our people that are operating them. So when we look at the principles of systems reliability, what do we look at? Automatically recovering from failure, right? We look at measuring the right KPIs that indicate business value. We want to test our recovery procedures, so we just don't want to assume that our systems are going to recover the way that we've designed them to. We want to focus on scaling horizontally so that we can deal with those capacity issues, because we want to stop guessing at capacity. That's a thing that hopefully we're not doing anymore. And then we want to manage change through automation that's always tracked and logged. When we look at the parallels between technical and human systems, for human systems, we've got dependability. And both our technical and human systems, they should be dependable. They should be able to perform their intended functions consistently and correctly, which sounds a lot like reliability. So we expect our humans to be dependable. We expect them to show up to work. We expect them to do the things that they're going to be able to do. But that's not always reality. We also have redundancy in both our technical and human systems, right? We have backups. We have the resources to make sure that if a disaster or something happens, our systems can continue to operate. But by a show of hands, who here is or has ever been a single point of failure? Okay, yikes. Let's just really quick, by show of hands, who here is currently a single point of failure? Okay, a little bit better, but still not the best place to be in. Because does being a single point of failure ever, wake you up in the, well, not PagerDuty, just the thought of being a single point of failure, does that ever wake you up in the middle of the night or make you stress out on vacations? Yeah, right? So having that redundancy built in is extremely helpful, but I can just say, okay, just have some redundancy. How do you do it? We build that redundancy in through education, through mentoring teammates, through making sure that we have the correct documentation. Just like I said, Anna's not here, but I still am, because we're both able to give this talk. So if there is an emergency, we've got some redundancy built in. It's because we're both educated on the same topic. I mean, we did create it together, so there's that. But if you're bringing somebody new to your team, have them shadow. Let's make sure that we bring others up to speed. I think in the late 90s, there was this mentality that you had to be the one person that knew the information because that made you super valuable at your job. Does everybody remember that? Nowadays, hopefully that's not still the mentality that your organizations have, because again, that's a risk for reliability for your technical systems, but also for you and that burden that that places on your shoulders. And Laura talked earlier about boundaries. And being a single point of failure is one of those boundaries that you need to set up with your organization and say, no, I cannot be the single point of failure. And I do understand that there is some privilege with being able to say that. So if you don't think your organization can handle it, and if you can't leave your job, work with them to mentor others and to train others, especially folks that are new, that are up and coming, because this helps everybody out. Also, adaptability. Both our technical and our human systems need to be adaptable. So we all learned about adaptability over the last few years, right? How many people had to change, how many people were part of organizations that changed their business models? Oh, like, okay, a couple, that's good. I think we all saw companies go out of business because they couldn't adapt to the changing circumstances. If you can't think of any and you don't want to think of any pandemic related, I'm just going to say Blockbuster. They weren't able to adapt. But we expect that our humans can adapt too. Unfortunately, organizations can put a lot on us that they expect you to adapt by giving up your holidays or your weekends or your nights to be on call. And the thing with humans is it's okay to put a limited amount of strain on yourself for a short period of time, but it should never become the expectation. So we need to learn how to adapt, but also to create those boundaries that Laura was talking about in her talk. And then resilience. Resilience refers to the ability of a system to recover from failures, disruptions, and adverse effects. And the same thing goes for us as humans. And oftentimes, we practice resilience through the form of game days or chaos engineering. We practice resilience by teaching others how to operate the systems. It's actually a great way to bring new people up to speed if you can include them into postmortems. Those junior engineers will oftentimes ask questions that you wouldn't have thought of. But they're starting to think about the systems in other ways so that you can design them to be resilient and fault tolerant in the future. And I'm talking about all of these things because we obviously want to prevent burnout in technology. And again, we hear about burnout all of the time. And it's good that we're talking about it, but we need to have some steps to work through it. So what is burnout? This definition was by Herbert Freudenberger, who's a German-born American psychologist who actually wrote about burnout in the 1980s. And it's the state of mental and physical exhaustion caused by one's professional life. Now, I do want to preface, I am not a doctor, I am not a psychologist, but I do disagree with this a little bit. Because it says, caused by one's professional life. And I'm thinking we can probably all agree that our personal lives can also contribute to burnout. Because our personal lives have so much to do with our work lives now. I mean, we integrated both of our lives, took that line away from work and personal when we all worked from home and had our children running around and our cats climbing on our keyboards during our calls. So I say there's a great definition, but we should add our personal lives into it too. So that state of mental and physical exhaustion. Now, burnout is not depression, but it can absolutely get you there. That's why it's important to realize what those signs of burnout are. So here's a non-exhaustive list of signs related to burnout. Now, let me tell you, for me, and I didn't know what was happening at the time, but my sign of burnout is I cry, like over everything. In meetings, it was terrible, it was embarrassing. Just somebody would say something just the slightest bit not nice, and I would cry. And I didn't know what was happening to me, and it was terrifying. And then I had so much anxiety that I was going to cry during the meeting that I would pre-cry, right, for the meeting. But as you can see, it's kind of this spiral. Luckily, I don't work for the organization anymore. This happened. I was at a doctor's appointment when a VP and the CEO were calling me to try to fix something, and I had a complete breakdown. And my doctor looked at me and he said, "You are not going back to work for 3 weeks." You know, and in that moment, I felt this sense of relief. And then I also weirdly felt this sense of shame, like there was something wrong with me, that I had to take time off of work. And I didn't talk about it for a long time, and I didn't tell people about it because, like, oh my gosh, everybody else's job is so hard, I can't believe I can't handle it. But I've learned that by talking to people and by sharing my story, you hear so many of the same stories, and it's okay. Recognize these signs before you can't come back from it. And it's okay to take that time that you need to heal mentally, because if you don't, I can assure you, and again, I'm not a doctor, so take it with that it will get worse. So luckily, I had somebody that recognized the signs right there for me. Now, I want to talk a little bit about incident response. Okay, so incident response is an organized approach to addressing and managing an incident. I do not know what just happened right there. But the reason that I'm talking about incident response is because burnout is an incident in our human systems. So when I talk about incident response, who here has been on an incident call or in a war room that's been absolutely chaotic, and you've got a sea level running in demanding action and trying to find out what's wrong? Okay, now who here's been on an incident call or in a war room where it's very cool, calm, and collected, and people know who's doing what? All right, that's amazing. Generally, when it's that cool, calm, chaos-free environment, that incident gets resolved a lot faster. Also, I don't work for PagerDuty, but definitely check out response.pagerduty.com if you want to know how to run those cool, calm, and collected incidents. They'll walk you through what organized incident response is if you don't have it in your current organization. So we focused on this organized approach in our technical systems. And the reason that we do this is to reduce the recovery time and costs associated with incidents. And we do this by preparing, so we practice for our incidents. We have systems in place to detect and alert us if something's going wrong with one of our systems or we're breaching a threshold. We have folks that get paged that assess that incident, they triage it. And then we spend time in that room, hopefully calmly, without somebody screaming over our shoulder, what's going on, responding to that so that we can recover. And then we should be conducting blameless postmortems so that we can learn from those incidents and ultimately prevent them from happening in the future. So life happens. Some could say that life is just an ongoing Sev 3. But what do we do to prepare for incidents in our humans? We can apply those same things that we do in our technical systems into our human systems, right? So first, prepare. And some of the ways that you can prepare to handle incidents are create a little personal run book. Create a list of contacts. You know, is there a doctor, a financial planner, family members, a therapist? Just create a list of contacts so that if there is an emergency, somebody can pick that up and know who to call to get you help. Also, you want to monitor the signals through that detect phase. And some of these signals could be your friends or coworkers coming up to you, asking you, is everything all right? Maybe saying, you seem a little stressed out or seem a little bit off. Listen to the folks around you. Because sometimes it's really hard to see these things within yourself. But, you know, Tim might point out to me that, Julie, you seem really frazzled. And if Tim told me that, I'd want to take that seriously. That's one of those signals. Are you waking up in the middle of the night? Are you dreaming about work like all the time? Those are some signals that you might be headed down that burnout path. Then you want to take a moment to assess the severity. So when Anna told me she couldn't be here for this talk, that was like blood pressure, right through the roof. But I took a moment to assess that. Is this a Sev 1 that's going to last, 6 months? No, it's rather short-lived. As a matter of fact, I think in 8 minutes, that incident will be over, right? But take a moment to assess it, determine the severity, and then take the time to respond. So as I mentioned, if that means you have to take a little bit of time away from work, please do that. Take those steps to resolve the incident. Don't forget to take the time to recover from it. So we do all this to heal ourselves. Okay, I feel great. I'm going to go right back to work. Just take a moment. Go a little bit easy on yourself. Take a time to recover, and then once this has passed, try to get your group of people together and go back and conduct a post-mortem on your incident. What were the factors that led up to it? What are the things that we can learn from this so that it doesn't happen again in the future? So this company, Yerbo, actually runs a survey and found out that 2 in 5 tech workers show a high risk of burnout, excessive stress, exhaustion, and a broken work-life balance. And I think that we didn't take the time to recover from the last 3 years and what that did to us, work-wise or emotionally. And I think that's why we see that number so high. But it doesn't mean we can't take that time now. So in our technical systems, we have observability, right? We have traces and logs and metrics so that we can understand how our systems are performing, so that we can act upon those signals. Well, it turns out that humans, right when they're deployed into production, they have some observability built in. We have our senses. We have our senses that can alert us to things around us. Now, not everybody's senses work in the exact way that everybody else's do. Some people's senses may send different signals, and it's great to understand how other people may interpret things, and this is why it's important that we help our friends and that we understand our friends and our teammates and that we can help alert them if maybe they're, again, acting a little off or if they're seeming to need some help. We live in a pretty cool world right now. Who here has any form of electronic device that is measuring their heart rate right now? On. All right. So we have all of these devices that can help us track those signals. We can track our sleep patterns. We can track our heart rates. I just did, I think it might be kind of scary, but I put all my medications that I was taking into my Apple phone, and it tells me when to take them, but also when there's a dangerous reaction, which, just to let you know, nasal spray can interact with a lot of medications, okay? But the point is, we can now track those signals in a way that can help us prevent burnout. Because if you're checking your sleep patterns and noticing that you're waking up a lot in the middle of the night, it's a pretty good sign that you're experiencing something that is wearing on you. If you're seeing extreme changes in your heart rate, it's a pretty good sign that something's going on, and that could be stress or burnout related. So taking the opportunity to journal these things is really important. And also, again, planning ahead, like creating that personal incident response plan or even creating a personal board of directors so that you have people that you can go to and say, hey, I think I might be experiencing something. Let's talk about this. Now, we also talk about capacity planning in our technical systems, right? We make sure that we have enough infrastructure provisioned. We make sure that we have the right people on call and enough of them on call. We make sure that our systems can withstand failure to the best of our ability. Humans also have a maximum capacity. We heard about that earlier today with boundaries. And that can be any one of these things: physical, emotional, mental. What is that maximum capacity and how are we planning for it? So we want to make sure that when we're looking at our maximum capacity that we're, again, not operating at 100% all the time. If you do that, you're not going to last very long. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Now, I've brought up postmortems a few times earlier, and postmortems are what we should be doing, blameless postmortems at the end of technical incidents so that we can understand the systematic factors that led to whatever that incident is in a blameless way where we remove our hindsight biases. This helps us learn from our systems, helps us connect with each other on the teams, and helps us prevent these failures in the future. So we need to understand that humans are going to fail as well. It's really, again, it's just like our systems. It's not an if, it's a when. We will fail at some point. So it's important to practice blamelessness with ourselves. I'm pretty sure that people, I don't know how many of you in this room can be hard on yourselves when you make a mistake. I mean, can anybody here be hard on themselves when they make a mistake? Right? So could you imagine if you were in a postmortem and you talked to the people in the room like you talked to yourself in the head after a mistake? How do you think that'd go? Like, ideally not. Go to postmortems.pagerduty.com to learn more. Again, I do not work for them, but it's a great way to kind of think about it. If you're in that moment where you're just beating yourself up, imagine if you were sitting at a table conducting a postmortem with a group of people in an ideal environment where you're not beating everybody else up. It will really help you understand and take the blamelessness out of that situation, because oftentimes we're not very kind to ourselves in our head, and it's something that we need to practice over and over, that kindness and that blamelessness. And also with our systems, we think about what are we doing today to make sure our systems work tomorrow, to make sure that we're reliable. Well, what are you doing today to make sure that Wednesday you has a better day? And that's kind of, if it's on your to-do list and you have the opportunity to do it today instead of pushing it off until tomorrow. Think about your future self. What are you doing? But the other thing that we now have the ability to do, again, is to build those human connections. And that's why I'm so excited to see people here and to just give out excessive hugs right now. Because we have the ability to build those human connections again and to be with people who can help us understand the signs within ourselves and who can also work together with us to build community. Because humans are not meant to be solitary creatures. We really are meant to socialize with each other. And I think for some of us, it takes practice. For some of us, we got really lost in the world over the last few years. We have to remember kind of how to socialize again, and that's okay. Now, just to get to be a little bit less reactive and more proactive, define some goals. And y'all, these do not have to be huge, like I'm gonna go climb Mount Kilimanjaro goals. I set a goal to build bag 1 of my Rivendell Lego when I was at Devopsdays Raleigh, and now I'm at bag 20. Just a little goal to get you started. These don't have to be huge things, just work towards these goals. And also, write down, who is your personal board of directors? Who are those people that you are going to call? And then another thing that I wanna leave you with is this concept of prospection, which is the action of looking forward and into the future. This is a term talked about in psychology today and can be really helpful in those moments when you're feeling very stressed out. Ideally, imagining what it's going to look like once you're past that launch. Once you're past this incredibly stressful time, once Black Friday is over. What is the future going to look like? But you don't have to limit it to work. What are your future big goals? What does it look like in the next 5 years from you? Because I can almost assure you that if you're experiencing a lot of stress today, it's probably not going to be the same in 5 years or in 1 year, maybe hopefully not even in a month. And then just some self-care tips. Check in with yourself often and check in with your friends often. There's a great burnout survey here. That's by Yerba, who I showed before. Go get a massage. Book a vacation. Go do something fun. Please use your vacation and turn your pager off. I always kept my phone on. I'd give people my cell phone number just in case something happened while I was on vacation because, heaven forbid, somebody do some chaos engineering wrong. My current boss is so fiercely protective of vacation that she threatened to cut off my Slack and email access if I responded to one more thing on a vacation. That scared me, y'all. I was like, no, I can't lose access. But then I really thought about it. I'm like, oh, why should I care? I am on vacation. And now I take my vacations and I come back to work and I'm actually recharged. So take your vacation and put the phone away. And then here's just some resources for y'all. So I'll leave that up here for a moment if you want to take a look at that. And then it's okay to ask for help. And please be kind, because we're all humans. But not all the pictures in this presentation were created by humans, so the ones with that were created by Dolly. And I just want to thank you and now let you know that I think you can go get drinks here soon. So thank you.